A judge has temporarily delayed Trump's deadline for the so-called buyouts for federal workers. A hearing is scheduled on that tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, Vice President J.D. Vance weighing in on the legal roadblocks that the administration is encountering, posting on X today, quote, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. Now, the Constitution, of course, sets up the three branches of government as a system to check and balance each other. Also tonight, the Trump administration has informed employees of another agency that they won't be in the office this week. Workers at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau have been told its D.C. headquarters will be closed for the next week. That is the agency that's tasked with looking out for American consumers when it comes to interest rates and fees from big banks and other lenders. Joining us now to talk about all of this is senior political analyst Ron Brownstein. Ron, thanks so much for being here with us. It's good to see you. I want to kind of zoom out for a second because we're getting new information about these tariffs, which I do want to touch on. But the Trump administration believes and has been very clear that they have a mandate to dramatically reshape the federal government, that all of these moves that they're making right now are targeted at that and that they're all connected. The question, though, is about how they're doing it and if it's legal and if it's constitutional.
Right, exactly. I mean, look, every president who wins claims a mandate. Donald Trump did win. He won all the swing states. He didn't get over a majority of the vote again, although he did win the popular vote for the first time. I mean, I think there are two ways to interpret what J.D. Vance was saying in that tweet. The relatively more benign interpretation, and I say relatively, is that he was signaling to the Republican appointed justices on the Supreme Court the way he wants them to interpret these suits when they, the most important of them, inevitably get to them. And they, in fact, have taken a pretty broad view of executive power in the past. The more ominous interpretation of what he was saying is that he was repeating something he had said several years ago on a podcast, which is that Trump, if reelected, should simply ignore judicial decisions. In fact, in that podcast back in 22, I believe, J.D. Vance quoted the famous, maybe apocryphal quote from Andrew Jackson about John Marshall, who created the idea of judicial review, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, and Andrew Jackson supposedly reacted to a ruling by saying John Marshall had made his decision, now let him enforce it. J.D. Vance said that would be a good motto for Donald Trump. So this could be, as I say, relatively more benign, a signal to the Republican justices, the way he wants them to ultimately rule on this. It could also be the first step on a road toward a full-scale constitutional crisis.
And so then we have the Elon Musk of it all, right? And his role in all of this. There are concerns about the unprecedented access that he and his team have, what they're doing with that information, how secure it might be. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said this to our colleague Dana Bash today. I want to play a quick clip.
I remember a time when Republicans were very careful about and worried about the government, particularly unelected people.
Well, we can't trust the government anymore.
Having access to personal data.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You are the government.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that the American people now are saying that we have had our personal information shared and out there in the public.
But now Elon Musk has access to it.
Yeah, but Elon Musk is part of the administration that is helping us identify where we can find savings and what we can do. And he has gone through the processes to make sure that he has the authority
You're totally
the president has granted him. I am today by the work that he is doing by identifying waste, fraud, and abuse.
And I guess the question here, Ron, is what do the American people think? And if they're okay with it, that's one thing. And if they're not, that's another thing.
We don't really have great reads on this yet, but I'm guessing that most Americans are not going to be that comfortable with the idea of an unelected billionaire whose profile really is someone who is at his best disruptive and erratic. I mean, nobody thinks of Musk as kind of a pillar of stability, rummaging around the plumbing of the federal government and having access to their private financial and medical records, perhaps. I just think that is more than most people are going to be comfortable with. And it fits what we were just discussing at the outset here, Jessica, which is that, Trump is taking this win to mean that he can push as far in any direction that he talked about during the campaign. And it's pretty clear, both in the confirmation votes and otherwise, that Republicans in Congress are not going to put up even as much resistance to him as they did in his first term, which wasn't that much to begin with. So you're really left with the courts. And ultimately, even though they are losing a lot of these early cases, at the end of the line of all of these cases are 6 Republican appointed justices. I was thinking today, in looking at these early decisions, think back to the immunity case with Donald Trump and how emphatically lower courts rejected his arguments. And then John Roberts wrote a decision that not only gave him everything he asked for, but ultimately even more than that. So we have a long way to go, but it really is, I think, shaping up that those Republican appointed justices on the Supreme Court are really the ones who are going to have the leverage to decide what the country looks like, what our constitutional democracy looks like after a few years of the Trump presidency.
Yeah, and then there's just this the idea that President Trump, since he took office 21 days ago, he's everywhere. And I know we keep saying flood the zone, but look, he's at the Super Bowl. He's talking to the press all the time. He is the news cycle right now.
Yeah, as was the case in his first term. I mean, Look, Trump, through his whole career, really has been someone whose greatest skill is commanding attention. He's been more of a marketer than a kind of a business thinker, and he remains that. Setting up 10 cities in Guantanamo as a way of signaling that he is serious about his deportation drive, even if we don't know yet whether he's ultimately going to deport more people than, for example, Obama did in his first term. Trump knows marketing, but he is also, as we talked about right at the very beginning, I think almost all of the constraints that he faced in the first term are gone. In his first term, he had to appoint people to his administration that represented other powers inside the GOP who sometimes said no to him and pushed back. That's not happening. In his first term, he had McConnell and Ryan as the congressional leaders who in private sometimes pushed back. That's not happening. In the first term, you had business leaders who were keeping their distance from him. And now you have a procession of them, proceeding to Mar-a-Lago, trying to get in his good graces. So Trump clearly has more freedom to do what he wants unfettered than he did in his first term. And that, I think, is not an unmitigated blessing for him, because there is clearly the risk with Trump that on multiple fronts he will go further than his coalition or certainly a majority of the American people will accept. Giving Musk unfettered access to federal records, maybe one front. Excessive tariffs. If he goes through, as he said today, Mexico and Canada still seem to be heading for 25% tariffs. There are a lot of ways in which Trump unbound could rebound in a way that is not positive for him or Republicans in Congress.
Yeah. We just have to see what Americans think about it all as the dust kind of settles on it. Ron Brownstein, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Happy Super Bowl. Yeah.
You too.